Hello, everyone. I'm Grace Chin, Interim Managing Director of Women in Film and Television Vancouver. Welcome to the How to Build a Basic Digital Strategy for Your Film Digital Marketing Workshop with Annelise Larson at the 16th Annual Vancouver International Women in Film Festival, or VWIF, produced by Women in Film and Television Vancouver. Before we begin, I acknowledge that Women in Film and VWIF are located and operate on the unceded traditional and ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples, the Squamish, Stolo, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. VWIF would also like to thank the following sponsors and partners, without whom our festival would not be possible. Please bear with me while I read. Uh, Canada Media Fund, Canadian Heritage, BC Arts Council, Creative BC, City of Vancouver Cultural Services, Telefilm Canada, the Indigenous Digital Filmmaking Program, Capilano University, BOSA Center for Film and Animation, Front Row Insurance, VIF Connect, William F. White, Stripe Graphics, Karen Leg Marketing and Design, Chair Times Chair, EMG Design, Pender PR, Loose Lips Media, Tech Butlers, and Ken Hayward. VWIF also thanks our community partners, the Vancouver Asian Film Festival, Vancouver Short Film Festival, Vancouver International Mountain Film Festival, DOXA Documentary Film Festival, Powell River Film Festival, Pacific Screenwriting Program, Cold Reading Series, Crazy Eights, Out on Screen, and Women in the Director's Chair. Last but certainly not least, we are very grateful to our workshop sponsor, Annelise Larson, Varia.ca, and Storypreneursunite.com. She is a digital strategist and former filmmaker who works with media industry stakeholders to use the digital opportunity to find, grow, and engage audiences and work towards sustainable business models. Her podcast, Story and Audience with screenwriter Jill Golick, can be found on all major podcasting platforms. And she just launched a new online digital marketing for media course in conjunction with the NSI, the National Screen Institute. For a link to Annelise's full bio, please use our festival website. We are at viwff.ca/events. Annelise's presentation is going to be about 45 minutes to an hour, I believe. She will open it up to questions from our live stream audience, you guys, after the presentation. So please post your questions in the YouTube chat, and she will respond when the Q&A begins. It's my pleasure, huge pleasure, to introduce you to this morning's workshop facilitator, Annelise Larson. Take it away, Annelise.
Thank you so much, Grace. I feel you deserve a round of applause for remembering all the acronyms. There's so many. Thank you to the festival. Thank you to Women in Film and Television Vancouver. I am indeed Annelise Larson, and I'm a little sad today because this is the first time in a very long time that I haven't been able to be in Vancouver in the month of March. I used to live there for quite a long time, went out there to go to film school several lifetimes ago, it feels like. But today I'm joining this virtual space from the traditional lands of many Plains First Nations, including the Cree, Dene, Nakota, Saulteaux, and Ojibwe, and the homeland of the Métis Nation, otherwise known as Treaty 6 territory, and in my case specifically Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. So as I said, I used to live in Vancouver for a very long time. I've been back on the prairies for just over 10 years now. And in the before times, traveled a lot to Vancouver. So it's great to virtually ground myself in that space, as well as the beautiful sunshine and melting snows of Saskatchewan, although I am really jonesing for those spring flowers. So send me pictures, people, please. So today, like I mentioned, I've come back to Vancouver for the festival for a number of years and run a number of different workshops. If you've heard me blab at all in the past, you know that I get very, very excited about the opportunities that are created in the digital space to bring together creators and audience. And I think that there's some real magic that can happen there. Today I decided I would take a little bit of a different tact than I have taken in the past. And so this is incredibly applied and practical because I think, I continue to do a lot of work. I teach, but I also do a lot of strategizing and implementation for filmmakers, other media storytellers, and really sort of across the culture sector. This year has been an extraordinary year. And I've been very busy because all of a sudden people realized that they needed digital strategies. The reality is they've needed digital strategies for a very long time, but it became, critically important this past year. So I'm hoping by sort of walking you through some of the basics and really coming at it from a very applied direction, that I will give you something that you can really use and tangibly increase the chances of success for your film or any other creative project. So let's dive into what I'm here to talk about today in a little bit more uh, precise detail. I will say that you can find the template, or sorry, the template for the digital plan template, which is not a Word document, it's a Word doc template specifically, and a PDF of this presentation in this little Google Doc folder that's sitting in the internet there waiting for you. If you go to bit.ly/capital G gift from capital A Annelise, you can get both of those things. You can download them now if you want, or you can wait till we're over. As Grace said, also, I'll hopefully have room for questions. I'm sure I will. I hope you have questions coming out of it. And I will be able to answer those at the end. But if there's stuff that comes up as I am going, please put them in the YouTube chat and Grace will make sure that I get them, and I will try to go through them at the end. So let's get started. First, if there are questions that come up that I don't have a chance to answer, or after you've slept on it and you want to say, oh, but Annelise, what did you mean when you said, X? Feel free to email me at storypreneur@gmail.com. As Grace also mentioned, I just launched a fairly robust, all comprehensive course on digital marketing for media in conjunction with the National Screen Institute. So if you specifically go to courses.storypreneursunite.com, you can get access to that. So I've tried to keep it as low a price point as I possibly can, and am also doing it in conjunction with the NSI as a fundraiser for them. So half the profits go to them, half come to me. And then again, there is the little lovely bit.ly link to find all the materials from today. So you don't have to worry if you miss something on a slide, because you can look at them at your leisure afterwards. And I believe as well, this video recording will live on the festival YouTube channel for the foreseeable future. I have no problem with it being up and out there. So when we turn our attention to looking at building out a digital plan, obviously you can't come to it with nothing. You have to have done some homework ahead of time so that you know what it is you're going to fill in all these sections that I'm talking to you about today. So I want to go through some of these foundational questions and the kinds of, I guess, questions about those questions to help you answer them. For me, I think there's a lot to be said for being strategic. I think before I get too far into this, I think, this year has seen tons of amazing, fantastic content experiences being put online, because that's the only way we could connect with each other for much of the year. And it's been a very, very exciting time as an audience member. Of course, totally overwhelmed with my choices that I had in terms of films and performance and all kinds of things, ARGs. But I think what really differentiates success for people is that they have some kind of plan, that they're thinking about this strategically in some way. So that is really my driver, because I think, all things being equal, there's a lot of good stories. I know everyone says, well, you need a good script, you need a good story. Absolutely, you need that thing, but there's lots of those out there. So I really feel that packaging your story with this kind of strategic approach, which is sort of story plus audience, will really help you achieve the success that you want to achieve, that you need to achieve. So let's start with these basic questions. The first question that you're going to need to know is, what is this plan for? So obviously this is probably something that you've thought about already because you've written the script, maybe you've even shot it. So you need to be able to articulate, what is this plan for? What is this project, this film? I think also it needs to communicate what makes it unique, because like I said, there are lots of great stories out there. There might even be comparable stories to yours that have or have not been produced. You really need to hone in on what makes it special and unique and different from what has come before, and the other opportunities, other competitors, I guess, that are in the space. The other question, obviously, that's a really obvious one. The next one is one I think that filmmakers don't think about. They don't take the time, right? They got their script, they're excited, they just want to get the thing made, they want to get it funded, they want to get it made, and they're going to move on to the next thing. Here is where we start to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff, to take an analogy from the prairies. You need to really understand your underlying motivation for creating this work of art. Why is this film important to you, to your career, to your team, to your company, to the world? And I think that is a really important question that's going to ground all of this work. Then you need to have that lead you to specific goals. And I would suggest, oops, 1 second, I somehow managed to get out of my presentation. Resharing now. There we go. Apparently don't hit the button at the bottom of the pointer. Okay, so what are the specific goals for the film? And I would say not just for this film, but really thinking about where you want to be when the thing is done, when the life cycle of this film is done, which we know can take many years, or even, in tandem with its journey. What do you want this film to help? How do you want it to help position you for whatever comes next? Maybe it's a leap to television. Maybe this is a documentary about an activist cause that you're close to, and actually your next work is not going to be a film, it's going to be more activist work. So really think about, what does this film need to do? What is the work it needs to do to help you accomplish and position you for whatever comes next? And then obviously in the context with this plan, you need to start thinking, okay, so within this digital plan, what are the goals that I need that are going to help me achieve that bigger goal, that bigger vision? So, you need something to drive it to. Without goals, we don't know where we're going, and, we can get really distracted by bright and shiny things that may or may not take us to where we want to go. Not that you have to ignore all those. Sometimes they're unexpected opportunities, and that's fantastic, but really use your goals as a touchstone for any strategy or any part of what it is you're trying to accomplish. As people who have heard me talk before know, the next really important question for me is the who. Who is the audience, the specific audiences usually that you need to reach and engage and tap into to help achieve these goals? You cannot do this alone. The film cannot do this alone. You need to bring along an audience, to attract an audience, to be able to achieve those goals. And the more specific that you can get, the better. I go into this in great depth whenever I talk. I'm not going to go into it into great depth today, but just trust me in knowing that the more specific you can be, the better. And try to get away from the trap of thinking about your audience in terms of traditional demographics. So don't think about it in terms of gender and age, because you can't really build a strategy around those things. You may as well build a strategy around what is the median hair color of your audience. It's not going to be helpful. So you need to really think about who are the specific audiences who are going to care about you and your film the most. What are the ones that are going to have the deepest emotional connection? And that comes through the power of specificity. Now, I'm not saying they're the only audience for your film, but they are the starting point. Because if you can make that emotional connection between them and your story, they are going to start sharing. They'll be compelled. They won't be able to stop themselves. They'll be so excited about it. They're going to want to share it out to their audience, which we all have, right? It's not formalized, but if you're online and you're doing stuff, you're connected to other people through the platforms that you're on, you have an audience. And to trigger that social sharing of people to their audiences, you need to cause them to feel something, preferably a big something. So once you've determined what those audiences are, and I generally suggest trying to start with a minimum of 3. 3 is actually a pretty good number, especially in the early days of planning. You don't necessarily know what are the audiences you're going to end up with, but 3 give you enough variety that you can come up with a pretty strong digital plan. Once you have a clear picture of who they are, then you're going to follow them. This is this audience-led strategic approach that I take. So you need to understand where these people are spending their time and attention online, because when people have big feelings, they want to connect with other people that have big feelings about those same things. We've certainly seen that used for both evil and good over recent history, but it is true. It is human nature. We want that validation of our own experience and our own opinions on things. And so you just need to go where these audiences that you've identified who love this thing, where do they go to spend their time and attention to sort of revel in this thing that they love? And then that really gives you the shape of your strategy. It's going to indicate certain platforms and digital tools that they're going to use. It's not necessarily a website, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram strategy, which I swear I still see, because I sit on funding juries, about 90% of the time. It might be that you discover in your wrestling rom-com actually needs to involve the Reddit community, because there's a ton of very active, engaged conversations and subreddits on the WWE on Reddit. So maybe it's a Reddit Pinterest strategy or an Instagram TikTok strategy. You just really have to follow your audience to where they are. And then you need to look for 3 things. You need to look for the relevant influencers, communities, and conversations. And those influencers are simply people within that audience who have garnered their own sort of audience inside of it. They have the time and attention. They are a trusted curator, a trusted entertainer, depending on the nature of that community. And then the communities and conversations, which tend to overlap. So it could be those subreddits, it could be a Facebook group, it could be, a specific hashtag on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter that is the people who care about and get really excited about this thing, sort of gather, like the sea shanty phenomenon on TikTok recently. So they are going to give you all the bits and pieces that you need to include in your strategy, which means you do not have to do everything. You only have to do the things that are of interest to the audiences that you are trying to target. So once you have found the places where they are, you need to go and do what I call lurking and learning. So you're not going there and throwing the door open saying, hey, look at me and watch my movie and contribute to my crowdfunding campaign. I won these awards. Aren't I awesome? No, you need to actually spend some time lurking and learning, not sharing anything, but taking the time to learn from that audience. What gets them excited? So, and the truth is, like, up to this point, all of this stuff is stuff you can do long before your film starts rolling out and can actually help inform your creative process. So taking the time probably before production, because you're going to have your hands full when you're making the movie, will set you, really lay a strong foundation for future success. And once you have a good sense of those answers, especially the who and the where, that's going to inform the how, which is really what's going to guide your campaigns, because you're going to have this understanding of who that audience is, what they like, what are the goals that you're wanting to achieve. And then you can come up, like I said, with these very specific, relevant, and yes, creative campaigns, because good marketing is really just good storytelling. So almost take these specific bits of nuggets and knowledge that you learn from going through this process to inspire you to create something that's not standard, that isn't just standing on a virtual box and shouting out at people about your accomplishments. Really try to figure out, what are the ways, what are the tools that you're going to use, what's the content that you're going to need to create to attract and intrigue and bring them into the world of your work and this particular film, and how you're going to engage and grow that audience, and most importantly, get them to come back, which is often quite challenging with one film, because then once they've consumed the story, then what? So you really need to give some thought to, how can you re-engage them? How can you bring them along in the process and continue to involve them in a way that's going to help you get to where you want to go next? In fact, the hope would be that sort of as you've got them on board and they become, your fans, that they're then, they're your cheerleaders. Your success is their success. They're going to want to lift you up and share what you're doing, and get involved in any way that they can to whatever you're going to do next. So I think that's really important. Think of this digital plan isn't, linear in some ways. It's just part of a continuum that will probably have to loop back upon itself over and over and over again. So those are these 5 basic questions that you need to start scribbling answers to, and really trying to figure out, good solid answers that are grounded in your goals and your audience, that will allow you to have the building blocks that you need to start putting together a digital strategy that's going to be effective. I'm going to do another plug for my course, because I haven't gone into great depth about how to get those answers. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, you can go check that out. You don't have to even buy the whole thing. If there's just one module that interests you, it's like only $25 US for a module. So you can go in and do a deeper dive on what that is, and hopefully, it'll be easier to come up with all those bits and pieces that you need to build that digital plan. So now we want to turn our attention to that job, that putting together a strategy for your film in a digital virtual context, which, has been a big thing this year, right? Even films that had a planned theatrical release had to do some kind of pivot to there's this whole new theatrical window called virtual cinema, that preserves that theatrical window. It is in partnership with theaters. It's usually distributors and theaters that are partnering together to make that happen, but also filmmakers can do that. In fact, I'll give another little plug. I just released a big report with Telefilm Canada that was all about what happened to films all over the world. It's called Thanks COVID 15 Lessons for Film Distribution from the First Wave. So there's lots of great little nuggets in there that might inspire you as you look towards this digital plan. But the reality was, even before COVID, like I said, everyone needed a digital plan because the chances that your film would get a distributor, that would get into a festival and then get a distributor and then have a traditional sort of theatrical release were very, very small. And even if that happened for you, you would have to be very strategic because it's unlikely that you're going to make a huge return for your investment until you hit that digital window, either with your it could be broadcast, but even broadcasters are doing stuff, they have their digital platforms now, their VOD platforms. So even broadcast becomes really a digital plan. And the support of broadcasters in terms of the digital space is widely varied. So it really becomes up to you to support your work. You can't just kind of sign it over to someone and let them take care of it anymore. In fact, you shouldn't, because you'll be let down. Because, to be fair, it's hard to be an independent distributor as well. Like, you're not Disney. And so even the distributors, especially, there's been tons in the States that have gone out of business, these smaller distributors, and locked up, potential for the films on their roster because they went into bankruptcy. So, sometimes it's better just to DIY it if you can. But even if with the distributors, they're going to not necessarily do a perfect cookie cutter rollout for everything, but likely they will, because it becomes less cost effective for them. So if you want to get as much out of it as you possibly can, you really need to figure out how you're going to support your film, because you're always going to have an end game, right? Hopefully now you're going to have an end game for that film, because you're going to want that film to do certain things for you to help you continue your career. And so having that plan is really important. So let's dig into, what I've tried to do is I've created this template, like I said, a Word document template that has there are traditionally bits and pieces that you would see in any kind of digital marketing plan. This is specifically for films. I've tried to sort of tweak it a little bit to give you a structure and shape. Obviously, these plans can be as different as your film is. It just depends what your film needs, but it gives you a place to start, and feel free to chop it up and make it do whatever it is you need it to do. Also think about who the audience is for your plan. Often people are putting these together to get investment of some kind, whether it's private investment or public funding. Often they want to know that you have an understanding of the audience and the path forward for your plan to feel more secure about giving them your money. So it could be an external document like that. It could be an internal document for your team to just, sit down and take the time, because hopefully you have a team that's going to help support the life of your film, so that everyone's on the same page and everyone understands what are the goals that they're trying to achieve. It's also usually associated with potentially not the whole life cycle of your film, but a specific time frame. And so that becomes really important in terms of goal setting and what you're trying to accomplish. And you probably will have to write several plans over the life of your film as opportunities and challenges come up, like COVID, or you didn't get the idealized path forward that you wanted to get. So the first section of any plan is usually some kind of summary. So remember, answers to that what question. So this would include, generally, you get to use your film logline that you've probably rewritten a million times. And this is typically, that one sentence that is used in all of your marketing materials. Maybe it's even, makes it on your poster, it's in your press releases. It is, outlining the central conflict and sort of gets people interested. It is a bit of a external marketing tool. Often funders will ask for also for something called a positioning statement, which traditionally in marketing is more of an inward facing tool for a marketing team because it will talk about your audience. It will talk about what is unique about this film that will appeal to that audience, and something called a reason to believe. So basically a justification for this statement. But it really is about making very clear what is special and unique about this particular story in relationship, again, to particular target audiences. You also might want to include bios, or be expected to include bios of whatever the team is that's going to implement the strategy. And although I didn't include it in this template, something I see a lot as well is something called a SWOT analysis, SWOT, which basically goes through your film and breaks down what are the internal strengths and weaknesses and the external opportunities and threats, and can be a really good tool for helping others understand and engage how well you understand the marketplace and the space that your film is going to occupy. Then we sort of get to the heart of a plan, in my opinion, which is what are the target markets? And like I said, this is about articulating who are the audiences for this film. I will even sometimes include sort of like a visual, like an image of that represents the people that make up that audience, whatever it is. I think it helps in even like really robust plans. You might create something called a persona, which would basically give you all create a character. It's basically a character, all you writers, basically a character that represents that target market, because it makes it much easier to think about the people, because all of this stuff, it may feel maybe too salesy or whatever, but really it's just about bringing the value of your story to other people, connecting to people. These are all tools just to help you do that. And we have them now, ones that we've never had before as creatives. So as you dig into, I would say, a good place to start is 3 very specific target markets. You're going to need to answer some questions about them. So essentially, like, who are they, right? So hopefully you've learned a lot about them from all that lurking and learning you've been doing. And this is maybe where you actually start to pull in some demographic information. They're defined by what they care about, or which could be, that they're concerned about the environment, or food sovereignty, or women in prisons, or they're parents of a certain age with children of a certain age. They love wine, they love sci-fi, there's many, many things. It's defined by what they care about. But after you get over that defining characteristic, then yes, you can start to include demographic information, like that they are, skew a certain gender and are a certain age range. Those things are valid at this point. You want to paint as clear a picture of who they are as possible. And if this is a plan that you're using to try to attract investment, you probably also want to provide some data on the size of the potential market, and there's lots of places that you can go to get that. You could get it from a third-party research organization like Stats Canada, or Pew Research, internet research from the States. They do a lot of really interesting breakdowns of different audiences, and a lot of this information is available for free. Again, if you've taken any worked with me at all, you probably know I get very excited about keyword research, which basically is a measure of the level of interest through the search engines. So that can give you some good intelligence too, when it comes to basically proving that there is a marketable level of interest from this particular audience. So that's the first. You want to paint a picture of them and the potential of them, probably, with that question. Then you need to dig into what we would call psychographics. So what do they care about? What do they value? What problems do they have? What do they want? And then you need to frame that in relationship to your film. How is your film, this is drawing those the through lines from identifying them through to your story. How does your film appeal to them? How is it going to add value, solve problems, entertain them? You know, and that part doesn't really have to be a very long answer, but you need to be really clear as to, it's basically giving your rationale for why you've chosen this particular audience to target. And then finally, again, from your lurking and learning, you want to give some examples. It doesn't have to obviously be comprehensive, but you need to give some examples of those influencers, communities, and conversations in the digital context that represent that audience. And I think this is really important, even if it's only like one or two, just so, especially again, if you're wanting to attract investment, you want them to understand that you understand who this audience is and that you know how to reach and engage them, and giving the evidence of, you know, this Facebook group and this Instagrammer and this TikTok creator can just give them a little bit of a taste that lets them understand that you understand who they are and where they're spending that time and attention. So for that section, like I said, I think 3 specific audiences is a good place to start. Maybe you find a 4th or a 5th. I wouldn't probably want to go too much beyond that, because then it just becomes untenable and unmanageable. But you want at least 3 to have some variety, because again, usually you would start these plans in the early days of the life of your project. And you need to sort of open it up for flexibility down the road, but you need to have a clear idea and path forward that you're trying to forge. And the audience is the way to do that. They're going to lead you. Next, you want to start to break down the different campaigns that you're going to include. Again, needs to be audience led, but I really think, as I mentioned, you know, good marketing is good storytelling. So every campaign that you think of, you should be clear on what its narrative is. Like, there's a value in that narrative. Again, just standing, you know, having a Facebook page talking about, oh, we just locked sound, we got into this festival, we won this award. Like, that's not really a very interesting or compelling narrative. So really try to get creative and think about it as just a different kind of story. A story that aims for, because every good story has a beginning, middle, and an end, right? So you need to have a goal that this campaign is going to help you achieve. So that needs to be very clearly articulated and should resonate with the answer to your bigger why question, you know, that you made for the film overall. It's probably a sub goal, but within the context of this campaign, and maybe it has to do with a festival, or maybe it has to do with another opportunity that you know about, but you need to have something that you're trying to accomplish, a goal that you're aiming for. And you want to have something called, you may have come across this, it's very lingo-y from the marketing world, business world, a key performance indicator, or KPI. All it means is, what is the piece of data or data set of data that you are going to use to measure your progress to that goal? So it could be that you're wanting to like grow your online presence in some way. So it could be in traffic or followers, you know, on Facebook or whatever platform it is that you're using. It could be that you're really wanting to lean into engagement. It could be that you're actually, one of your campaigns might be a crowdfunding campaign, which is one that is really an audience development campaign with this side benefit of raising money. But again, so obviously there would be things along the way that would be about money raised and that kind of thing. So just really hone in on what is the data that's going to help you measure and track that goal, and see if, you know, see how close you are to achieving it. Then you have to think, so I've come up with these great stories that I'm going to be telling as part of my campaign. What are the tools that I need to use? What are the digital platforms and tactics that I'm going to need to leverage to bring these campaigns to life. I think it's really important. And again, like the why questions, this is something that people don't think about very much. Why are you using Facebook? And it's not just enough to say, like, and maybe Facebook is the reason, like, there's a really good reason, but you need to convince me that you are using Facebook for a really good reason, because otherwise you're just doing Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter because that's what you see everyone use. Those are the most, well-known ones, and you'll have a website. You need to understand what is the purpose of each of these platforms or tactics that you are using. It's another kind of sneaky why question, and one that we don't challenge ourselves on. I have worked for years on an Indigenous ghost hunting show. And although we have done and experimented on a lot of different platforms, we are very much a Facebook centric community now, because that is where our audience lives. We have two really strong audiences. One is a very strong Indigenous audience, and the other is middle-aged white ladies, because they love the paranormal and they love the more spiritual approach that this show takes. And so Facebook is this perfect Venn diagram of the Indigenous audience and the middle-aged white lady audience. So it's like the perfect tool. We can actually reach two audiences for the price of one. So that's what our purpose and the reason for us using it is, because we know, again, luxury of working on a series over many seasons. With a film, it's a little bit more challenging and difficult, especially if you're jumping all kinds of different topics and filming styles and stuff. You should also make reference to the campaign. So the previous section, you should say, like, we're using these tactics are going to support this campaign, this narrative that we're telling. And you also, of course, want to demonstrate that the specific target markets that you are going to be reaching and engaging, that these tools make the most sense. You may even want to do a little callback to justifying all of this stuff by demonstrating that, that there's a lot of really great Facebook groups. And so that's why we're using Facebook, because there's all these really great conversations, and we need to be where our audience is, where are the platforms that they're using, and where they're spending their time and attention. So those are important pieces. And then, of course, you should be, again, making reference to what is the data that these platforms are going to generate for you that are going to be helpful in measuring your campaign. So you can see that these are all, like, nothing is just a clear silo. Each part of this plan is really interwoven with the rest, and the repetition is fine. It's good. Then we're getting to the last two big sections of the plan. One is a schedule, right? So it could be that you're doing this, and you know that there's certain things coming up, the film exists and you're rolling it out. Or so then you can attach specific dates and timeframes to it. Or it could be that you are treating it, and this is often what happens when I'm building one of these out very, very early. I talk about phases. So I could have my foundational phase that sort of campaigns that are running all the time. And then I might have, well, if we get into film festivals, here are our campaigns and our plans and our best practices for being in festivals, for doing community screenings, for when we get a broadcast, for the VOD release. So you could tie it to that kind of schedule instead of hard dates. Because again, in early days, it's really hard to be able to do that because you have no idea yet what that life cycle of your film is going to be. But the schedule should make sure that you can align it with the goals that you have for the film and for the plan, and as much as possible, have those time related milestones. Now, it might be sort of sub goals or things you're trying to hit along the way to achieve your ultimate goals. And then also, and it could be with scheduled opportunities that come along, like those I mentioned, right? It could be special events, could be festival screenings. You need to incorporate all those things. Sometimes if we're sort of, things are happening, these campaigns are running, we're way, way, way past lurking and learning, and we're now trying to grow an audience, and I've got a team, I might actually create a living document that's like a Google sheet that has all these specific dates in, so we can keep on adding them as we go along. And everyone knows what's coming up and how the campaigns are going to work together to support these scheduled opportunities as well. And like I said, you should try to tie goals, like we're going to increase our followers by 15% in 6 months. And then, we want to achieve 8,000 social media fans in the first year, or whatever it is. But you need, I think as much as you can tie it to time frames, the better. And sometimes you might want to go with even in 6 months, in 12 months, in 18 months, and start there, especially when you're doing sort of a plan really early in the process. Then it doesn't tie you down to anything, but it gives you general time-related accountability. And finally, we get to the budget. Obviously, you should have money to implement this plan, filmmakers. You generally want to have at least 10% of the money you've raised for your film should be saved for these kinds of activities. So often, and I know this, you love your movies and you want them to look and sound as good as they possibly can. And you want to put everything on the screen because you're going to say, well, I don't want a shitty film because then, I won't be able to market it anyway. And you're right. But, you can do a lot with a little bit less. Because if you don't have the resources once it's done to support it, it's going to die on the vine. And so it's important to make sure that you have some budget left for this audience development and for creating more opportunities and maximizing those that come along your way. So some of the costs that could be included, developing a website and hosting it doesn't have to cost you $10,000. Even using platforms like Squarespace and Weebly and Wix, which come, sort of bundled with website and hosting all in one. There are lots of levers in those platforms that allow you to build something for fairly cheap, that will look really good, and that can house the content that you need to support your film. You might also want to make sure that you invest in search or discoverability strategies. So you may have heard another acronym, search engine optimization, or SEO, which just basically means making your online presence as search friendly as possible, following all of those best practices, providing a good user experience, which is very, very important to the search engines. They don't want to drive traffic to crappy sites, and making sure that whatever you're doing online is as interconnected as possible, because the search engines basically, have these little programs that go out and they index text and they follow links. And so those links, those both within your website and across your online footprint, are really important. I also mentioned keyword research. So when I'm talking about strategic content creation in regards to discoverability and search, it is very much about looking at what people are searching for, and if it's relevant, crafting pieces of content that are specific to answer that query. Basically building a bridge between yourself and your audience with the language that they're using to search for stuff. And creating discrete pages. So like all of your cast should each have their own separate page, because if they have fans who are searching for them, you want that page from your film, talking about how wonderful they are and all of their credits and everything. You want that to be potentially a really good search result and allow them to discover your film through having that kind of piece of content. So really strategically thinking about that kind of content, you may want to invest some money in that. Social media and community manager. there's a lot that you can do with tools in terms of scheduling, but you probably still need someone to check in every day or every other day just to manage the conversation that's happening. So it's just not you talking and never responding, liking good comments, answering questions. A year ago or so, Facebook started doing something where if people interact, like react to your post, but they don't follow your page, you can invite them. So even just something, as simple as that, going through and inviting. And so you need someone, a human being, to go through and manage some of that stuff. So, paying someone to do that if you don't have the bandwidth could also be an expense that you want to cover. Also, the act of getting your film online in some way or selling it DVD copies, that still works. Making sure that you're budgeting for some of the packaging, right? Like the artwork, the cover, the poster that, or the image that goes with your film when it's on iTunes, making sure that the specs and the different requirements for the video and audio files and stuff, like all of that takes time, needs to be needs to check all the right boxes to be able to get it up there, especially on the transactional VOD platforms, the TVODs. And of course, bigger players like Netflix will have this, the specs that they will want you to deliver to. Obviously, you can get stuff up on Vimeo and YouTube, yourself. You can go very DIY, but even then, like, you should have a good still for the the freeze frame that is going to basically be the cover on that platform, so that people know what it's about, and you want to make it visually appealing, not just some random frame from in your film. Supplemental digital asset creation. So, you're probably familiar with, EPKs and having those press kits that are, for the publicity push that you'll do once the film is done. It'll include some behind the scenes pictures. It'll include great headshots of your cast and maybe key creatives. You may want to also make sure, well, and your trailer, of course. You also might want to ensure that you have additional, like, again, trying to extend that story, and maybe, having your creative campaign that you come up with may require your actors and stuff to do some extra stuff other than just what is on the page in your script. Or if you're in a documentary, you're going to have tons of stuff that doesn't end up in the final cut. You need maybe to budget something to edit together some of those additional bits and pieces that you can then use to support your documentary film. I think sometimes people get really trapped in putting a lot of money into capturing behind the scenes images and videos, and you definitely need some of that, but don't blow your whole budget on it, because unless you have like actors that come, or subject in a documentary case, that come with a built-in fandom, a built-in audience, it's really only going to be people that love the people that are in it and who have made it, who care about those behind the scenes shots. So get what you need for your EPK, unless you've got those beloved figures in the creation of the work. Then make sure that those beloved people are in every behind the scenes shot. I learned that the hard way. Online money for online advertising still can be incredibly well and highly targeted online. It's becoming a bit blunter because of privacy issues, and the EU especially really pushing back on platforms like Facebook and Google. But you can still get better targeting than you would in conventional advertising, and it's a lot cheaper and it's more trackable, especially once you're online and you could track the money that you've spent right through to whatever the goal is of that particular campaign. Could be email signups, could be purchases, could be, a whole number of things. But when it all is staying in the online ecosystem, there are ways to get that information out with tracking pixels and other stuff that I'm not going to go into here. But you should have some money for online ads. Absolutely. Even if it's only $500 that you can deploy strategically at key times in the life cycle of your film. Additional merchandise, if you're doing a crowdfunding campaign, as I mentioned, good audience development tactic. You're going to need to make things for different tiers of contribution, but it could be for other stuff too. It could be digital assets. It could be beyond just a hat and a t-shirt. The sky is kind of the limit. There's some pretty fantastic on-demand merchandising sites that you could use to create not just another revenue stream, but also people that really love a thing kind of want to wear it on their body and say, I am of this fandom, I am of this group, so that other people in that fandom can recognize them and go, oh yeah, I love that thing too. So merchandise can actually not just be about revenue, it can also be about deepening the emotional connection with your audience. And then finally, all of these tools that I mentioned, if you're using, like a social media tool like Hootsuite or Buffer, or you're, using Vimeo at the pro level, you need to, make sure that you've budgeted for the fees of these different tools and platforms and those subscriptions. So again, that should be something that you also include in that budget. And so that's sort of the basic parts of it. You can see in the template that is how it is all laid out. And it gives us, should give you sort of a foundational structure on which, feel free to break it up, move it around, do whatever you want with it so that it's the most usable for you. But I know that sometimes it's really overwhelming to try to think about how you can, even start, because you don't have an understanding of what it is that you're going to need when it comes to building out one of these structured plans. You can Google it, digital marketing plan. You can Google it. There's a million templates out there, but there's none that is specifically for film. So I hope that this is a very helpful document. So those are kind of all the bits and pieces. So I guess I'd sort of wrap it up now in terms of my presentation part of our time together today. Again, the URL to get the PowerPoint, the PDF of the PowerPoint and the template is bit.ly/G gift from A Annelise. So that's that. So in terms of questions, now I just have to see, are there any questions that have come up? Do we have anything? Okay, we have one. What is a good budget for digital advertising? Well, like I mentioned, even $500 you can actually do a lot with if you're highly, highly strategic. And I think, as with anything, any bits and pieces of a campaign, I always like people to be intentional. So when you're running ads, just don't, boost them for $25 and hope. Even with targeting, you need to be specific and intentional with what you're trying to accomplish. So I was working on this film. We had an $8,000 budget just for ads to support it over quite an extended period of time through its film festival run, wanting to support it through, trying to get visibility for, the Academy so that maybe you could get some nominations, which we don't know if that's happened yet. But I mean, that seemed like a really robust budget. Often I'm given a lot less than that to help support a film. But 8,000 is great. But I think even with $500, you can do something good with that if you're really clear on what you're doing. I am putting this money in to test X, whether it's visuals or creative or calls to action, all those kinds of things. What would a typical fee look like for hiring a social media manager? Well, I guess it depends on, These are really weaselly answers, aren't they? It does depend. It depends, I guess, how senior that person is. You could probably hire someone young and eager and smart for between $15 and $25 an hour. You may want to go to a longer, bigger contract than that with someone more senior who then has junior people that are working for them. But usually I've seen people hire sort of younger, eager people between $15 and $25 an hour. And also, I think it depends where they live in the country, because obviously in Vancouver and Toronto, they may charge more just because their cost of living is more versus someone from the regions like me. Joe, I'm looking for another one. I know who this question is from. What are your recommendations to maneuver around Facebook and Instagram and their censorship around cannabis? Yeah, well, I think it's not just cannabis. There's lots of issues that there's huge sensitivity around now because, like I said, I think, there's a lot of Facebook, and which owns Instagram, and Google, are getting into a lot of trouble for a lot of reasons around privacy. I've worked in even the charitable space, and people running raffles, and then you run afoul of gambling. The regulations around gambling. So I'm sure that part of the cannabis issue is that they have sensitivities around that because it's not legal everywhere, even if your targeting is keeping it within the place and the country that is legal. I suspect there are bigger algorithmic things going on that will automatically shut you down. Sometimes I have stuff that that gets blocked because the algorithmic thing says, oh, this is going against our terms. And I don't know specifically what Facebook's rules are around cannabis. I suspect that they would be similar to advertising around, liquor and drugs and medicine and stuff. Like, you have to really jump through a lot of hoops. I've worked with some people in the medical profession, and even they have really big challenges using those platforms. And in fact, often what they do is just opt out and try to figure out another way to get around them, because often we're just too small. We don't have enough big money that we're paying to the platforms. I think if you have a big enough budget, you would probably get a sales, an account representative that you could actually have a human being to talk to and work through these issues. But we generally in Canada don't have that, especially from the creative sector. So I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you, Siobhan. Have I seen any projects using Discord or Twitch as part of their digital strategies? Absolutely. In a couple of instances, Twitch, if you have anything that touches on, if one of the audiences that you're going after is gamers, obviously you want to go where they're spending their time and attention. That's Twitch. They're doing a lot of there's a lot of time spent there. So I think a lot of the bigger Twitch streamers, it's almost like YouTubers, right? Like, they have their own revenue streams from the Twitch platform. So maybe one of the best ways to do that would be to get in partnership with not the biggest Twitch streamers, because obviously, they're too big, but sort of the more mid-level ones. Discord I find really interesting because of its association, especially with Letterboxd. So if you guys don't know about Letterboxd and haven't been on Letterboxd, that's the first thing I would recommend you do after we finish here today, is go sign up. Because in terms of reaching movie lovers where they're spending their time and attention online, it is Letterboxd. There's a great active, robust community. And they have some really interesting things that they do with Discord in terms of conversations around scavenger hunts. They basically, someone will be given the right to do a scavenger hunt on some kind of theme for the month. And so say, I keep on telefilm. If there's anyone from telefilm, you need to be on Letterboxd. And they could do like a Canadian film themed month. So every month you would have to build and add to your list like a Canadian horror film, a Canadian sci-fi film, a Canadian comedy, and you would build a scavenger list of movies that satisfy each of those criteria. And there's a lot of sharing of those lists. And it's really lovely because films that it's like, it's all evergreen. Like films can be rediscovered and get new life on Letterboxd. And I find that the conversations that happen on Discord around that community are really, 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 really interesting. So I'm sure you could do that with, there are other communities. That's the one I'm the most familiar with because I spend some time there. Do you feel AMAs and passing over your Instagram to other actors are a good strategy to build audience? Do you worry that the person taking on the account might not uphold your brand? Well, you have to talk to them about that. Like you need to be really clear on what your brand is, but it's absolutely worthwhile. I worked on a project that had an ensemble cast of really popular young actors, and that was one of our best. Well, we did a lot of really interesting things. So that was one of the best things that we could do because they came, remember when I said like actors that come with fandoms, and they would do like an Instagram takeover on, they would do a live on theirs, and they would do a live on, in this case, it was a web series Instagram account at the same time. And it was fantastic. It was fantastic. And even with two actors doing it together, so it gets a wide array, especially with actors. What was so lovely on that particular project was that the actors would kind of mentor each other. Those that didn't feel as comfortable with social media and those that did would do these things together and sort of teach each other the ones that were newbies the ropes. But I think as long as they love the project, they don't want to hurt it. They don't want to hurt you. If they're on board and they want to bring those eyeballs to this story and to your work, just have a conversation with them. They're just humans. Even if they're younger, more impetuous humans, they're still got brains. they can be told. Oh, Clubhouse. I know it's very popular, and to be honest, it's not a place that I have ventured yet, though I am planning to do it in the near future because I have a number of people that I really respect that are doing these things. I think it is like most of these platforms as they start out, a bit of Wild West, a lot of techies and, sort of the geeks that are really into radio and that kind of thing, but there's zero quality control. So I think, you would have to wade through stuff, but I certainly know that people have been creating some really interesting opportunities, but you have to something good to talk about, right? You can't just be on Clubhouse to be on Clubhouse, just like you shouldn't be on Facebook just to be on Facebook. You need a good reason, and that reason is ultimately your audience. And if you feel your audience is there, then you need to be there. Like one of the reasons I had a very similar initial reaction to TikTok because I would watch my kids use TikTok and it just gave me a headache. I thought, oh my God, this is awful. If I have to do something on TikTok, it's going to kill me. But then I thought, well, you know what? Doing this stuff with a dance company right now, and there's so much with dance and music on TikTok. I just suck it up, Annelise. Go and be on TikTok. And the algorithm is so smart that in terms of what it curates for me, it's actually a completely different experience, I think, than what my kids are seeing. And for dance and music, I think it's a really, really great tool for connecting with audience. So again, Clubhouse, my own personal feelings about it. But if there's evidence that that's where your audience is, you just got to go and learn and try, and with intention. So you're not just going there to burn time. You're intentionally going there to learn something and to learn how to reach the audiences that you want to reach and engage. Do you build a tone document to adhere to when handing over an account for an AMA? I don't, though I have done like a branding, like a brand document, which would essentially be the same kind of thing. And it's not just for the AMA, it's for everything. Because in the case of that particular show, I knew that our actors, and learned very quickly that our actors were our best asset because we had zero money for like ads and stuff. Our actors were our best asset. So right from the start, I was working with the amazing Lisa Purdy, and she was really very good at driving that sort of intentional tone of the whole show and what we were going to do, and that was great. And then we got to scheme on top of that, but that gave us a really strong foundation for all the crazy, wacky, creative stuff that we did on top of it. So I think the same thing would apply to an AMA. And I don't necessarily think it has to be a really formal document. I think a good conversation, like to keep the enthusiasm of that ensemble cast up. I met with them once a week. It was a web series, it wasn't a film, so we would have, wasn't that our, it's a long story, but there was a new episode that was accessible, I'll say publicly accessible every week. And so, bringing them along and encouraging them and rewarding them. I even had them tracking how much traffic they each sent to our online presence. So it became a little competitive. That was really awesome to incentivize them to get actively engaged in promoting the show. So yeah, I think, just by making them feel on the inside, that was really great. And obviously you're not going to have that opportunity to do that every time. Because especially with a film, you've done the film, and then maybe when you're actually starting to promote, it might be like 6 months, a year later, and you want to bring in the actor and everything. But I think there's ways to do that just with a frank conversation. Clubhouse would be a great platform to interview team members and invite fans to listen in and ask questions. Sure, if that's where the fans are. I think it's really difficult to bring people into a new space. I think you want to create the path of least resistance. So if you feel the audience that you're trying to engage is on Clubhouse, go for it. I think that's a great idea. And yeah, for sure, instead of like a private Zoom, you could do a Clubhouse thing. I think, again, you'd have to make a case, right? Like a rationale for why that platform, instead of it just being the latest, coolest thing, which is also something that people sometimes get distracted of. But if you feel that that's where the audience is and that you've already grown a following, then absolutely, Clubhouse would be great. I'd love to see that. I would invite me. I'd love to join. How much importance do potential investors and distributors put on a strong digital strategy? Depends on the investor and the distributor. I find in the States, when you're going after American money, a lot. Mostly, in fact, I think it was Stars, the broadcaster Stars, like, again, it was talking about series, not a film, but they said, like, don't bring me a pilot, bring me an audience. And so, like, the pilot is the mechanism through which the audience will be brought to their platform, but they're trying to bring, of course it's different now because they're on Disney Plus, but back in the day that was true. And I think anyone that is closer to the market, which is the States, because they don't have a lot of public funding in the creation of these kinds of amazing stories, those distributors, those broadcasters, those private investors really want to, the digital strategy is just a means of demonstrating that who the audience is and how to engage them. It may not ever be implemented, because that sometimes happens. If you're successful in getting, say HBO money, that may not, they'll do their own thing. They don't need you. But they want to, that can get them as excited as a really great script. So I think bundling them together is a great idea. And the podcast that Grace mentioned, a Story Plus Audience, that I did with my friend Jill Golick, who's a screenwriter in Toronto, was very much about how developing both together, developing your script, your story, and understanding at least of your audience is a really great way of protecting your story. Because sometimes investors want to blunt it down too much to make it, appeal to the general public, and then it appeals to no one. So how do you decide on what your audience is in the first place? Is that based on the script, or do you develop the script based on the audience you want? Okay, so I think it's based on the script first and foremost, right? And I know there's always a very delicate balance when you are writing. And listen to the podcast. I'm really serious. Story Plus Audience, with, if you just put my name in to any podcast platform, it's 8 episodes, really an easy listen. I think they're around half an hour-ish each, some longer, some shorter. But it was very interesting having those conversations with Jill and getting her perspective as a writer, and a lot of her process that she put into researching characters. And I, having worked in documentary myself, the process of researching, whatever the documentary about is very aligned with that the same research that I do to develop that digital strategy. So I know that there can be some ickiness in terms of feeling, well, I'm writing to a particular market, and, there can be a disconnect, especially if it's not a good fit for you, if it doesn't feel like that's an audience or want to know. But I think if you can do it in a more organic, in tandem kind of way, that even as you're brainstorming, like early days, you think, okay, I'm looking around for a new project, I'm going to brainstorm a whole bunch of ideas. And then you start sort of doing research into each of those ideas, whether it's characters, setting, subjects for a documentary, whatever it is. You can actually run through some of these strategic sort of research tips and tools and understand, oh, well, there's a lot of interest in Jane Austen, or there's a lot of interest in this particular topic. Like I can see in Google Trends that there's a real upward trend. People are really getting into this, and that there's some upward momentum, so that you're already excited about it. Like it still has to creatively come from your heart and your gut and all that kind of stuff for you to be able to do the writing. But there's nothing that says you cannot do that and also be aware that there are other people that are interested in it. I think making more creative choices in kind of an intentional, strategic way isn't necessarily a bad thing. And it doesn't have to feel like icky used car salesman-y. It's just sort of reinforcing it so that you can build upon your momentum with your projects more and have more success and actually make a living from your creative work. Hope that answered the question. In terms of public funding versus private US investment, does a robust digital strategy provide an edge when applying to creative BC telefilm, etc.? I would say yes, especially private, because usually, there was this one film that was financed again a number of years ago by a whole bunch of dentists. And basically the pitch to the filmmaker was, just don't go to Vegas this year. Give me that $10,000 you would spend in Vegas, because dentists have a lot of disposable income, and give it to me to make this movie. And he was able to make a case for it. There was also an emotional connection to the setting of his story, to the dentist that he went to. But he was able to finance his film that way and make a really strong pitch in terms of articulating very clear audiences and really it resonating with that investor. And that was even in Canada. That wasn't even in the US. So often when you're going after private investment, they won't have, they're not used to investing in culture. But in the States, or even going to like seeing that there's this board that is interested in this certain issue and finding the person, because a lot of, especially when you're working in the social impact space, a lot of big companies have corporate social responsibility departments now, and they have to invest in public good in some way. And so sometimes you can make that pitch to them, but they're very much interested in it being presented to them in terms that they understand from the business world. So I think having a digital strategy gives you that language to be able to make a pitch that, again, is the path of least resistance. It doesn't have to hurt their brains too much. You don't have to get too far outside of their comfort zone. You just have to position it in a way that makes sense for them. I would say that in a lot of cases, with our public funding in Canada, our funders over the years have had that requirement be more and more and more important. Anything with the Bell Fund, you have to have your discoverability plan, which is essentially a digital marketing plan, but sort of through the lens of discoverability, but it still is essentially the same idea. It's just positioned in a different way. It all comes with them trying to make smarter decisions about how they invest their money. And if they feel that it's that a great story is grounded in a great plan, and it might not be to make money, it may be to make, to have positive social impact and, on issues of activism of some sort, that can still be a good outcome, that it increases their confidence. So I think the more solid those plans can be, whether public or private, the better you do increase your chances. You obviously still need a good story. You still need, all of that good creative stuff. But I think that's what can help sort of put you a little bit ahead of the competition and securing that money, is having some kind of strategic plan around it. For casting generally, do you think it's a good strategy to be casting actors with strong social followings and know-how? Yes. All things being created equal, yes. Having that web series that I talked about, where we had that ensemble cast and having some very digitally savvy young actors who absolutely love, became like their social media mom, getting them all motivated. It was great. And it was fun. It was fun for them. And again, all things being, if you got two actors, both could do the job. One has a lot of social media know-how and has a demonstrable, engaged audience. Big numbers are not enough. You need them to be engaged. And in their contract, you make sure that it's not enough for them to have that and never leverage it on your behalf. Like, really try to get them in on that right from the beginning. I know when we cast that web series, we looked specifically, most of our actors did come with those built-in fandoms for a reason. It was by design. It wasn't just an accident. We made those choices. So I think it absolutely 100% helps. Should the strategy campaigns be ongoing or just for specific phases of development, production, et cetera? You would always have you always sort of have a foundational thing that's running all the time. That is like the day-to-day, just managing what you're doing online strategically. And then, you could basically add these other layers as different things come up, whether it's, here's my film festival strategy. I got into VIFF, and, here's how I will support the film during VIFF. It's my goal for VIFF is to do, X, Y, and Z, or for broadcast, or, here's my community screening strategy. But you still would, you can't just lay fallow in between those moments of things, exciting happening. It's better if you can have a backbone that it's not always just about, you might feel, I have nothing to talk about. Well, you don't have to, and shouldn't actually always talk about your film. So there are a million different rules of thumb as to how much content you share out that's about you and how much about, other things. One of them, and just one of them, is like 70% is value added content that you share that could be yours, could be someone else's, 20% absolutely sharing other people's stuff, and then only 10% is promotional. And I think that's really important, to keep the promotional stuff to a dull roar and add all this extra value. And that can go on long between. That ghost hunting show, I once had a year and a half between two seasons that I had to fill, and desperate to try and find a way to add value. Again, very different than a film because it's an ongoing thing. But what I did, because I knew that audience really well, and I knew that what they wanted to do more than anything was share their evidence, their paranormal evidence, with the show and with each other. So instead of having a season premiere that Halloween, I launched a private Facebook group for them. That was the value that I provided. And it's the smartest thing I think I've ever done, because it is such an active community, and we don't have to really, the show doesn't have to do much. We vet members, we sort of police it a little bit, give them some exclusives. Often, we'll release our trailer there first, a day or two before we'd release it for the public, give them a sense of being on the other side of the rope, right? They're insiders, but mostly it's just them sharing their evidence with each other and chiming in. It's incredibly active. So I think that there's lots of things that you can do that don't necessarily have to be about these other sort of milestone, exciting things that happen for the film. And it's often why for films, I say maybe not to build a social media profile, like a social media presence that's just for the film. Maybe it's for the filmmaker or the production company, because that offers you more long-term value, and you own it then. And then you can bring it with you to the next project, which is really great, because there is so much heavy lifting that happens, at the beginning to grow these things. So to have to do that over again every single time is exhausting. So try to build upon it in some way. It can be hard to budget for a community manager full-time or even part-time, but social media is a time-consuming to manage and to build an audience. Are there any automations or efficiencies that you could suggest to help? Yes. I think something as simple as a social media dashboard tool that allows you to schedule stuff. So Hootsuite, Buffer, Later, there's a million of them out there. Some of them are really, really affordable. They'll even give you like a little taste for free. So you can get 2 or 3 profiles in there that you can manage for free. How I usually handle that is I would, like, once a week, take the time to sort of schedule out the content that goes out over the course of that week. So a concerted, hour, maybe. Like, it gets easier because you learn more about what your audience likes. So over time. So you take that hour and a half, 2 hours, say on a Sunday, and you schedule out your week. And then you just do a very little light touch, like 5 minutes a day, throughout the rest of the week. And that allows you to keep a little bit of the live, but also provides you with, balance. Because life is very time consuming. So yeah, so that's the thing. And watch your data. I think that's another thing. Like, watch your data, because that is actually another story. I see stories everywhere. That is the story of your audience, is in your data. And so if you're paying attention, you can see what is working and what is not. And then stop doing the stuff that's not working. Like with the ghost hunting show, we're not really doing much on Twitter and Instagram anymore, except during broadcast. We're all in on Facebook. That's what we're doing, because that's where we get the biggest traction. And that's where our fans are. That's where they want to be. And that has changed over time, but we wouldn't know that if we weren't paying attention to the data. So I think that's really important. That's probably the biggest efficiency tip I can give you, is pay attention and respond to your data. All right. It looks like we're done. We're going to wrap it up, Grace.
Hey, Annelise, thank you so much for this. Like, these insights are like crazy awesome. I'm sure like our live stream audience will totally agree. How are you feeling about today?
Good. Good. I get to talk about the stuff that I love, so and that I know is helpful for people. So that's always energizing. So
That is
it doesn't drain me.
that is awesome. Thank you as well to our live stream audience today for joining us.
Yes,
We do
thank
have,
you.
yeah, huge hand. We do have a couple of days left of the festival. Our films are all on Viv Connect until tomorrow. So please visit biwff.ca to find out more for more film information and for tickets. And we also do have a couple more online events. Our final installment of the Best of the Fest Awards is tomorrow, Sunday, March 14th at 5 p.m. as well. Please do join us. Just click on the join live stream button from viwff.ca/events. Annelise, thank you so much again for
Oh,
joining
my
us.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, and everyone go take Annalise's courses and things because
Thanks.
because this has been so helpful. I mean, how can you not want to check it out, right? Yeah, and thank you, live stream audience, for joining us. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you. Yeah, bye bye.